What is the most WTF thing you've experienced seen during a flight? I saw someone fart themselves awake then go back to sleep. An autistic man walking up one of the aisles in first class, pants down, pooping the whole way. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline, a passenger sitting next to her pulls out his cock and starts pissing in a bottle, then hands it to a stewardess, who didn't even bat an eye. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank's mask over her mouth. Apparently they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? I was on a flight from Amsterdam to NY one time and there was a kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, a stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshments cart into the aisle right in front of it and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run like that down the aisle," or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Flying from Atlanta to Washington DC, we were about 45 seconds post takeoff when the guy beside me unbuckled himself and started running up the incredibly steep aisle. The flight attendants immediately start yelling at him to sit down, even going so far as to fumble with the intercom. About 10 feet from the front of the plane, one of the crew said, "Flight lady, sir, I'm going to have to demand you sit down." Guy, "Mom, I'm going to wet my pants." He barricaded himself in the bathroom for about 10 minutes and emerged to clapping and angry looks from flight attendants. He ordered a water with no ice in it when they got to our aisle. Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when about halfway through the flight a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. I was in a hallway seat. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and assesses the situation like a boss. It was Dr. Oz. Not really a WTF, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome. Blah blah, so we're just leaving Cleveland. We should be in. And then slightly under his breath, but not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says, "Where the hell we going?" Long pause. "Chicago." Everyone laughed. A good times in high times. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back with my younger brother and the lady that occupied the third seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed tit. To this day I have no idea how you respond to something like that. While waiting to use the water closet on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet fapping away. There was no mistaking it. This guy looked like a poster boy for the Vinegar Strokes. At first I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As he turned his head to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight and even the next day. So, since that time I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I'd rather just hold it in than see another buckache party. I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin, TX. About an hour into the flight I notice this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn toward the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she is led to the bathroom. As she is leaving her seat, she hits herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this sit and vomit aroma rapes my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it as best they could, but it made no real improvement. TLDR, old woman throws up and hits herself on a flight from LA to Austin. I was on a flight to Chicago, was supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing they told us it was too icy and we were being diverted to Midway. Midway and O'Hare are 26 miles apart, so we land at Midway. We disembark, and as we are leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take it to O'Hare. We all said duck it, we'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So about 5 of us, out of a full flight 90, got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane. Then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. TLDR. Saw a creature on the wing, throwing explosives in the engine, attacked me, totally freaked out. Dan Aykroyd drove me to the hospital. That is really ducking sad. I don't even like cats, but I feel so sorry for that lady. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get a hand job from his wife in the seat ahead of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. On the way to Japan, I look across aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and brings out a large stash of porn mags and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. One time I was the only person on a very big plane going from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then I have used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. I once looked out the window to see a MiG-23 flying beside us, close enough to clearly make out the pilot looking at us. He stayed there for a minute or two longer, then banked away. This was in 1988 or 89. Flying from Moscow to Kiev. I believe it was in an IL-62M. I'm a bit of a plane nut. In grade 12, I was on a band trip to New York, and of course we flew there as it's a long ass drive from Vancouver. We were seated alphabetically, and the school band took up a good 10 rows of the plane. This also resulted in me and 2 of my friends sitting close together. Towards the very end of the flight, they turned to me and say that on the count of 3 we're going to throw our in-flight pillows at another mutual friend some 4 or 5 rows back. Pillows not being so aerodynamic led to only one hitting its intended target, and the other 2 hitting 2 other people. All 3 hit grabbed their pillows in addition to the ones we just threw, and chucked them back at us. Again. Only some made it all the way back to us, with others being hit and caught up in it, eventually, and spiraled so out of control that there was, for a good 5 or 10 minutes, about 9 pillows in the air at all times. The crew eventually made an announcement to ask passengers to please refrain from throwing loose items at each other. The teachers were pissed. But duck that. TLDR started a pillow fight on an airplane. I wonder what caused the cat to die. I looked out the window and saw this massive shark hurtling through the air, and that was the last thing I remembered before waking up in hospital. I had to get a separate seat from my parents when I was 15. I was watching pre-downloaded YouTube videos on my iPod when some 30-year-old next to me decided to show me a video of his GF giving him a BJ. It was a horrible video. Edit. Tense. Not mine, but my sister's. She was once on a long-haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night while everyone was sleeping, suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this was not that long after 9/11, everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. Not on a plane but a train. There was a guy and a woman sat with a blanket over the women's lap. The man's left hand was under the blanket fidgeting around, and the woman with her face in her hands. The man's right hand meanwhile was holding a Snicker bar he was trying to open with his teeth, and was reading the sports section of a newspaper that was on the table in front of him. True stories, that is a boss. Flying Seattle to Vegas. A black lady wearing a bizarre Playboy pink sweatsuit sits in front of us. She immediately starts talking non-stop to the business people next to her. She tries 5 times before the plane even leaves the gate to order drinks. The stewardess has pretty much had it with her already. We get in the air and she starts ordering vodka non-stop and gets overly friendly with the poor people sitting next to her. The stewardess eventually cuts her off and the lady goes berserk. She's screaming, "You bit fat white itch. I'm being discriminated. etc." She was arrested when we landed, which I think is extreme, but it was amusing. I wasn't there for it, but this happened to my cousin. He was flying in South America, and about halfway through the flight he realizes he really needs to take a piss. The plane he is on is a tiny prop plane made for tiny people. He is 6'5". He awkwardly climbs over his ace-lumets and shuffles to the back of the plane. As he is closing the door, the captain comes on the loudspeaker and warns of upcoming turbulence. He thinks, "Duck it, I really need to piss." He crams himself into this tiny bathroom, manages to whip it out, and right as he starts to pee they hit a huge bit of turbulence that knocks him off his feet, backwards, through the bathroom door, and flat on his back, in the aisle, still peeing straight up in the air. He was completely mortified and managed to get back up, pick up the door and work himself back into the bathroom. He waited for like 20 minutes hoping no one would have seen it, forgotten about it by then. But when he went back out to take his seat he got a standing ovation from every single person on the plane. Ouch. Gremlin on the wing. No one believed me. Not really WTF, but when I was a flight attendant I saw some pretty awesome fireworks displays from the sky every the 4th of July. Amazing. Not on the flight but before. I watched a Hasidic Jew get tased at JFK for refusing to remove his shoes, setting off the alarms and then freaking out that he will not let them search him. I was sitting on a B747 British Airways. We were taking off from Heathrow Airport. Just left the ground and I saw this black thing flapping against the wing. I thought, damn, must have got a bird or something. Black thing continues to slap and seemingly get bigger. It was a long piece of rubber, some sort of lining, seal, or something. And then it simply just ripped off and ended up in some lucky kid's backyard. How's that for good maintenance? I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines, I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this the pilot announces to the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we are now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. Date: the 11th of September, 2001. Location: on a plane 2 hours from landing in JFK, Nick, airport when the towers were hit. What scared the shit out of me was this flight attendant's face as she walked past me. This was before the pilot told us over speaker that we had to turn around back to Greece. I was just playing my Game Boy, wasting time when I look up and see the flight attendants run past me with a face that looked scared to death. Has worried the shit out of me because flight attendants are always calmer than Hindu cows. So in my head I'm thinking, duck, something might be happening, and just imagining the plane was going to drop any second. It freaked me the duck out, but then the pilot got on speaker and said the towers were hit by kamikazes and we had to turn back. The entire flight back the only image I had in my head were World War II style planes with Japanese kamikaze flying into the towers, and I was just wondering why the duck Japan would attack us. I was on a flight home from South Africa after a family vacation. My dad is a diabetic, but he usually keeps his blood sugar levels pretty regulated, so I never worried before. Mid-flight, I wake up from a nap and see him slumped over the side of his seat. He was taken to the back of the plane, where 3 doctors were examining him. They said his heartbeat went up to 220 or something, which I think means he was an inch from death. All I remember is seeing my mom and brother break down. I began having flashes of life without my father, and it overwhelmed me. I felt sick to my stomach, imagining what life would be like, when all of a sudden his heart rate stabilized. The doctors on board said it was a miracle, and I felt so much relief. The plane had to stop in Senegal, where my dad was transferred to a hospital. He wanted me to keep going, Since the semester was starting soon, that flight home alone was terrible. I felt the other passengers watching me the entire time. He is alright now, but every time I get on a plane I always remember that feeling of leaving the whole world behind. The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I woke up to a thunderstorm outside with purple lightning bolt. This is your captain speaking. We're about to get into a little bit of turbulence. When I first read the title I thought it said what is the most WTF thing you've experienced during a fight. I was about to tell this story about how I used to beat the it out of myself. Never mind. Kinda WTF. Kinda annoying. But the call button above the seat behind me shorted out with 1.5 hours left in a flight. Ding. 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 For about an hour and a half. It was very, very annoying. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s, and a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. I was in a Black Hawk helicopter and we were all kinda dozed off sleeping when suddenly the helicopter took a dive. When that happens you float up but you're strapped in. Feels very weird. My male friend sitting next to me grabs my hand and is screaming. After 10 seconds it finally levels out. The pilots never mentioned it afterwards, so I think they might have been messing with us. It was really scary. One of those moments where you think, that's it, I'm dead. It wasn't really a WTF moment for me but for the guy next to me flying home from Amsterdam. I was pregnant and had the window seat and the only open seat on the plane was next to me. Well, some drunk asshole was in front of me and a young Dutch guy next to him. The drunk had already fought with the flight attendants to serve him more drinks when he was clearly drunk. But to be more of an ass he continuously got up and down out of his seat to get into the overhead compartments, trampling the Dutch guy each time. Then he drenched the guy in beer and soaked his seat too. I offered to let the guy sit next to me, warning him I was pregnant. Poor thing. I spent the next 8 hours crying at random and throwing up into bath bags. He had to keep getting up and stealing other people's bags too. He was sweet and sympathetic, but when it finally seemed to stop the flight attendant didn't come to get the full bag right away and I dropped it on the floor. It exploded all over both of us and our stuff. Needless to say I was sorry and felt bad, but we spent the last 2 hours and a transfer flight covered in bath. It was his first trip to the States. Welcome to America. Alright ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're right on time for our landing in Chicago. We'll be making this flight at 50,000 miles per hour, flying at 500 feet. I will treasure that mental image forever.